Hello, everyone. My name is Lauren, and welcome to our New York Rapid DNA webinar hosted by GTH DNA in conjunction with our Rapid DNA learning platform, Go Rapid DNA. And a big thank you to our speakers and attendees. And I believe our law enforcement and crime lab audience today will find our agenda very helpful as you consider how to best move forward with rapid DNA programs in the state of New York. And over the last 30 years, traditional DNA testing has revolutionized how crimes are investigated and prosecuted. And the incredible success of DNA has created more demand than most state and local labs have the resources to deal with. And as a result, backlogs and processing times expand, and limits are put on the types of evidence allowed to be submitted, such as property crime evidence. And law enforcement in the United States and throughout the world are taking notice that rapid DNA is an impressive tool that could bring crime labs some relief on cases suitable for rapid DNA testing, providing police instant results when time matters. And success stories from around the world highlight rapid DNA's impact. And one of our law enforcement speakers will present how his rapid DNA program routinely identifies suspects and exonerating others. And he will further explain how his program has achieved impressive results even without access to CODIS databases. However, it is clear that most robust and successful rapid DNA programs are those that have access to criminal offender DNA databases. And you will hear from other speakers that will explain how New York law enforcement agencies could have access to CODIS databases for evidence tested on rapid DNA in the next 12 to 24 months. Rapid DNA can be operated in police departments by law enforcement officers rather than in the crime laboratory. But one common theme you'll hear today is that the best rapid DNA programs are those that are established in close coordination and partnership with your crime laboratory. And we are very pleased to have the New York State Police Crime Laboratory presenting today that I'm sure will amplify this message. And we have 6 distinguished speakers that will be covering the advancements of rapid DNA in the United States and specifically here in New York. And the format for today's webinar is that we will hear from our 6 presenters whose presentations will last approximately 10 to 15 minutes each. And then we will have about 15 minutes to address questions from the audience before the webinar ends at 11:30. And you can submit a question at any time during the webinar, and we will do our best to address your questions. And if we don't have time to address your question during the webinar, we will work with the speakers panel to follow up with your questions later this week. And to submit a question, please post it in the Q&A chat box, and your questions will be sent directly to the panel and will not be visible to other attendees. And for those of you that are authorized to receive continuing education credits for today's event, GTH DNA will be offering attendance certificates. So if you would like a certificate, please leave your email in the Q&A chat box or send me an email directly requesting the certificate, and we will send one to you within the next week. Please enjoy today's event. And our first presenter is Lisa Hurst. Lisa is the Director of North America for GTH DNA, where she has worked for over 25 years on forensic DNA public policy and legislation. And Lisa will give us an overview of rapid DNA, a legal review, and federal funding opportunities related specifically to New York. Over to you, Lisa.
Thank you, Lauren. Happy to be with you guys today. As Lauren said, I'm just going to give you a quick overview, try to make sure everyone's sort of on the same page with regards to rapid and what it is and what it can do. So, no, apologies. Okay, rapid DNA. So what is rapid? Rapid is a new technology that processes DNA samples in 90 minutes. That's the revolutionary piece of this technology. Think right now about how long it takes. You have a crime scene sample. routine. You send it to your crime laboratory. Most times it may take weeks, maybe months before you get a potential match back on that DNA sample. With rapid DNA, it's possible to get matches to crime scene evidence and to offenders in your custody to see if they match the crime scene evidence within 90 minutes. This was specifically designed for non-laboratory personnel. The end user that was in mind as this technology was developed was a law enforcement officer who can have sort of minimal training. You don't need the highly trained lab analyst to operate these machines. It is always, and we'll talk about this, a strong recommendation that you have partnerships with your laboratory to make these programs successful. But it can be operated within your precincts by non-laboratory personnel. It uses the same scientific analysis methods as used in the crime lab, and it does this in a self-contained desktop-sized instrument. So it's not a huge, it doesn't have a huge footprint. It's smaller, and we'll show you in just a little bit a view of a demonstration of that. So again, important, you can act on investigative leads with DNA evidence just within hours rather than waiting for that lab turnaround. And importantly, it's at this beginning stage of your investigation where you can not only hone your investigation on the right person, but you can also eliminate incorrectly identified suspects. So it really can create efficiencies in investigations. The not so rapid. So to understand, rapid does have some limitations. It is not a replacement for your traditional lab-based DNA analysis. Again, you're always going to want that lab on the back end if you have problems, if you have, and especially if you have more problematic types of evidence. So it's not advised for complex casework, things like mixtures, really low level touch DNA, anything that's a degraded sample that's really, really old. Those are really still best sent to your crime lab. They have the training and expertise. Rapid is best for that single source sample, the drop of blood, saliva, that sort of thing. Rapid has not yet been challenged. We get this question a lot. Has not yet been challenged for admissibility in court. It has not had those Dobert Fry hearings yet. It has been used in court. The defense just hasn't really challenged it for admissibility yet. We know that's coming at some point. The defense, of course, is going to challenge this at some point. But really the need for admissibility hearings has been largely mitigated by a recommendation by a scientific working group that recommends using this A swab and B swab. And you'll hear more about this, I think, is through this presentation. But you have one good swab. You have one crime scene sample. You take 2 swabs from that crime scene sample. The first swab, the best swab, that one goes straight to your crime lab. The B swab then is used in the rapid instrument. So this is really getting into sort of a lead for a presumptive identification to get you on the right path. And again, just to reinforce, the best rapid programs and most of the rapid, I would say all of the rapid programs around the country that I'm familiar with do use, have a crime laboratory on the back end. Great, ideal if you can use a local crime lab in your area or your state crime lab, but there are private labs that are accredited that are great to use as well. The only problem, of course, is that those will cost a little bit of money. So there's two uses for rapid DNA. There's the arrestee or offender identification as they come in through booking stations. And then there's also the other one is the investigative lead, the evidence processing. For arrestees, just quickly, and sorry to tell you, in New York, you would need a law change. In New York, you're not allowed to collect DNA on arrest for inclusion in your state database. The state law does not allow for that. You do have a lot of misdemeanor convictions and felony convictions, of course, but you have to have an arrest, the correct type of arrestee law. New York does not have that. It's just a law change. If you can get the bill passed, that could certainly happen. Arrestee DNA collection, this was sort of the first step that the FBI and scientific working groups took to stand up these systems. So you collect and process that sample at the booking station while that offender is still in custody, and you can then immediately search a special index of concern within CODIS, and usually within 24 hours you can search the entire CODIS system. And so, of course, CODIS is the combined DNA index system. So that's our national DNA database. You can search that in about 90 minutes while the guy is still in custody. This means you can prevent bad guys from being released, because right now, by the time a match comes back from your crime lab, a lot of those guys are already in the wind, and they know what they've done. And it can create public safety situations where now your officers have to go and serve warrants on a guy who may understand that he's being looked at for other stuff. So it just creates a better functioning public safety system, a more efficient system. Louisiana was the first to come online with this. They have, I believe, somewhere between 3 and 5 systems that are live right now processing these offenders. Florida was the next state to come on board. They're rolling out 8 to 10 as we speak, additional booking station sites in different counties. And we have a number of states that are working on the development on getting that IT structure in place. I won't get too far into this, but Baton Rouge was the first location, or East Baton Rouge in Louisiana. They had some immediate great hits across state lines. Within, a lot of them were within their own jurisdiction. And everything, as you can see here, from carjackings to homicides, attempted murder of a police officer, rape, and burglary. So a great functioning and really good proof of the system and how it works. So rapid DNA, the evidence application, and we see a lot of interest from law enforcement on this side of rapid DNA, being able to find that blood drop at a crime scene and getting rapid, using rapid with it. There's about 3 samples that you can use, or 3 database versions. The 1-to-1, this is the most common. Of course, this is where you have a crime scene sample and a known suspect, and you just compare the 2 samples to each other. Streamlines your investigations again, quick exclusions, and really begins to use DNA as an investigative tool rather than just a tool for the prosecution in many cases. The local labs, you'll hear more about local databases, and especially Ben Salem, the stats I have on this other side. I'll let Sheriff Herron speak to that. But local databases is sort of the next step up. This is matching 1 to hundreds, maybe thousands as your database gets bigger. It's a local database, so it's your local offenders. It takes crime scenes, suspects, and volunteers. And so this really does require a voluntary consent process, because again, this is outside of your state law. This would be setting up a local index. A lot of bigger crime labs within New York already do have suspect indexes. And so this would be creating one with rapid, using suspects and volunteers as well. These are really effective, and we see them more often where that state database is not yet available to law enforcement for matching. So the state database, we do have a number of states that have opened, not the national database, but the states say, this is my DNA database set up by law. My legislature said it's to help law enforcement look at cases. So they have a way of making a copy of that database, if you will, just the state offenders, and allowing law enforcement to search that database with their evidence samples in a controlled partnership type of way. So, and even within CODIS, we do see that most matches are actually made at the state level. So this is a powerful tool. We do have a number of states, Arizona, Connecticut, Kentucky, Missouri, already operating these systems and adding more instruments even now. Oklahoma has a program that's actively preparing. Louisiana, and there's actually another big state on the East Coast. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to talk about it, but there are increasing number of states that are really going with big programs to get this started, sharing their state databases. So these are 1 to probably tens, if not hundreds of thousands. New York would probably be hundreds of thousands of offenders to match against. And lastly, sort of the golden egg is CODIS. This is at least, last time I checked, 23 million samples within CODIS, offender samples and evidence samples within CODIS. This is a powerful tool, this national DNA database. Again, right now, evidence can't be processed using RAPID, or evidence can be processed using RAPID, but cannot go into CODIS now. You'll hear, though, about some changes that are coming in 2025. So listen carefully to that as our representative from the FBI talks about what the plan is. And I would just kind of consider thinking about working groups. All of this is going to require a lot of coordination, working carefully with labs. It's going to require money, which is why I would suggest having legislators within your working groups. They need to understand how it works and why funding needs to come with this and other possible policy changes. Lastly, a lot of questions always about funding. Right now, there's not a lot of federal grants available for rapid DNA, but an excellent opportunity are the federal earmarks. The earmarks are not too difficult to get to. You see that we've had over 70 applications over the last several years. These dots, the blue dots are applications that are in process right now. All of the other dots are agencies that have actually already received successfully this money. We're seeing around 600,000 per site. The FY25 cycle has already opened and closed, but if anyone is interested in the FY26 cycle, we at GTH would be more than happy to kind of help guide you through that and explain how it works at some other time. Just let us know if you're interested. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lisa. Our next presenter is Rob O'Brien, and Rob works at the Global Forensics Justice Center at the Florida International University. And Rob will provide a technical overview, including a short demonstration on how the rapid DNA systems work. Thanks for joining us, Rob. Over to you.
Hi, let me go ahead and share my presentation. Okay, so yes, I'm Robert O'Brien. I work at the Global Forensic Justice Center. We have been involved in rapid DNA testing since probably when it first started with some of the earlier versions of the instruments. Right now, we do a lot of training for rapid DNA, and we do support law enforcement as well as the military on their uses of the rapid DNA instrument. So first of all, what is rapid DNA? This was a little bit mentioned before. Basically collecting a sample and you're processing it in 90 minutes. It compresses a standard DNA analysis workflow into an easy to use mobile process. So these instruments, based on their size, they can be set up in any laboratory, can be transported easily. They're designed to be operated by non-technical users. So law enforcement, military, crime scene personnel, you do not need to have a scientist operating these instruments. And importantly, they have minimal hands-on time. So once you get these instruments started running, you can walk away and go do other tasks. It's really an easy three-step system. You place a sample into a cartridge, which is inserted into the instrument. Then the instrument processes the sample, and then you get your DNA results. Now, these DNA results are confirmatory. This is not a presumptive system, because the quality of the DNA that you're getting is the same that the laboratory is going to produce. So when you get investigative lead, when you get a match with these, it is going to be the same level of a match that the laboratory will provide when they run it. This is just an example of the two systems that are currently on the market. You have the Rapid ID on the left, and then they have the Andy instrument on the right. Both systems have the ability to have both reference and casework. They have two different cartridges for both systems. So both systems have a reference cartridge and a casework, which is going to be more of your crime scene type samples. So your reference samples, typically buccal swabs, and different sample collection devices. So usually whatever you can get your reference on, whether it's a buccal swab, you can also run blood references on these and run them as your reference sample. For your crime scene type samples, now we're looking at blood, bone, and tissue, which could be from a mass disaster situation, saliva, hair, even taking samples off of clothing can be processed on these instruments. It works very simply. Your sample is placed in the cartridge. That is usually less than 5 minutes to actually get your sample into the cartridge. Your cartridge is inserted into the instrument and it's left to run for 90 minutes, at the end of which you come back and then you have your full DNA profile. This data, like I said, can be used to match against databases. They were talking about that earlier, whether it's a local database or maybe eventually in 2025 when they're talking about possibly going to the FBI matching into CODIS. But if you get a match with this data, it is going to be a definitive match. For the user who may not be familiar with DNA processing or what a DNA profile looks like, it's going to give, the systems give a flag system. So usually you'll get a green flag, which basically means you have a full DNA profile, then there's no need for an additional review of the data. This is going to be acceptable. This is going to be a 100% match, great data. Yellow flags will mean that the profile needs to be reviewed. Someone with expertise in DNA analysis may need to take a look at the profile to determine if it has enough data to be uploaded and be used in a match, or if it is too low level and will not be a match. Yellow typically will be anything from a great profile where you have one slight, maybe one missing allele or one imbalance, to a profile that's a mixture and cannot be entered into a database. A red flag will usually mean there's an instrument issue or possibly a reagent issue. So typically when you get a red flag, you have to look at someone has to be able to look at it and determine whether we're having an instrument error message coming up or if something went wrong with one of the reagents. So if you get a green check mark, the Rapid software, it is allowed to basically match a confirmation between suspect and casework DNA profiles. Typically in booking stations, the system needs to produce a green check mark in order for it to be searched against any databases. Yellow means you need some kind of technical reach back with a trained DNA profile analyst. So whether you are paying for a private lab to do this or you have a partnership with your forensic laboratory, they can review the DNA profiles and then they can let you know if this is good to be used for a match or if it's not good to be used for a match. Or they can actually reanalyze the data. Some of the systems now, you can actually export the data. They can export the data and import it into their analyst software and reanalyze the data using their protocols and their methods. A rapid DNA sample guide is important. Agencies need to validate. So before you decide to use this, you do need to validate of what type of samples you're going to run on this instrument. Typically, you want to target high-level samples, as mentioned before, body samples where their body fluids present, like blood, saliva. So you're looking at, typically we run here blood samples, we do cigarette butts, drinking containers, gum, even a plucked hair, a single strand of plucked hair will be good. You need to really validate these and then also figure out what type of samples don't really work well on these instruments. So as mentioned before, something with a lot of mixtures or very low level degraded samples. Then for processing it, you do have the A swab, B swab method, where the A swab or the first swab taken, which usually has the majority of the DNA, is sent to the DNA lab. So if there is a match, they can testify on their results. And then the B swab can be run on the rapid DNA instrument, which is going to give them a investigative lead, which they can use immediately. There's also the bouquet swab method, which is where you attempt to swab the stain with 2 swabs at the same time. One is being run on the rapid DNA instrument and one is being sent to the lab. And also rapid DNA companies, if you're going to be purchasing an instrument, you need to ask them to provide you some kind of a field guide for sample processing, because not everything is going to be a swab. Like we have some images there of a cigarette butt and how you would process a cigarette butt for running on the rapid DNA. It may not be as simple as swabbing it. Similarly with a piece of gum or piece of cloth, those things are a little bit different. So if you are looking into purchasing these instruments, you are going to want to get with the company selling them and asking them for a field guide of how to process the different types of samples that you would want to run on the instrument. Okay, so that's the end of my presentation. So I'll now hand it over to Lauren.
Thank you, Rob. Our next presenter is Sheriff Fred Herron. And Sheriff Herron is currently the Sheriff of Bucks County, Pennsylvania. Before being elected sheriff, Fred was an early pioneer of using rapid DNA when he was the police chief of the Bensalem Township. Over to you, Fred.
You're still on mute, Sheriff.
Oh, sorry. Yep. Do you see the presentation?
Yes.
You do see it. Okay.
Oh,
Do you
now
see
we're
the,
seeing your email.
How about now? No?
No, there it
Okay.
is. I just want to enlarge it.
Okay. Okay. I got my camera here. It's on a different. Oh, there we go.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. So welcome everybody, and thank you for allowing me to share this. This is a pretty amazing technology. We'll get into a little bit the history, how we get involved, but really, I like this one, one phrase, taking the word serial out of crime, one swab at a time, because that's really what we're doing. I've been now going on my 39th year of law enforcement. As Lauren had said, I was the police chief in a municipality that started this. I was there for 36 years and then got elected to sheriff of the county. And we just acquired 2 more instruments to deploy throughout the county, one in my office. But we've seen a lot of technology over the years. A lot of things come and go. There's a lot of new stuff out there. But this is definitely the top 5 of pieces of equipment that I've seen in my almost 39 years now. And it literally takes the word serial out of crime because it stops crime in its tracks. It stops crime within 90 minutes. And we're going to talk about some of the wins that we got and how we got there and what we're doing, because Pennsylvania is a lot like New York. We are a convicted felon state. We are not an arrestee state, but we're going to tell you what we do to still get people's DNA into a database here. So if you don't know where we are, Pennsylvania, we're right to the south of you all, and Bucks County, we border Philadelphia on the bottom right-hand part of the state, right near New Jersey. So we're about an hour. I can make Nathan's in Brooklyn in an hour and 15 minutes from my house. So we're very close to New York City. Bucks County, this is pretty important. It's shaped like Italy. It's very long. It's about an hour and 20 minutes north to south and about 20 minutes east to west. But that's what makes it kind of a little unusual, that it'll take us some time to get from one end of the county to the other. Again, I said I can be in New York City before I can be in the northern part of the county. My town is where I was all the way in the lower end of the county. Now I'm more in the middle end, and I have offices in the upper and the lower end. So we're more spaced out throughout the county. We have a population of about 626,000, about 1.4 million daytime. And again, bordering Philadelphia, Trenton, and Allentown. In our county, Pennsylvania is a Commonwealth, so there's a lot of police departments. There's about 1,200 police departments in Pennsylvania. So in our county, we have 39 police departments with about just under 1,000 sworn officers. Which rapid DNA application did we decide to choose? Well, rapid at booking stations is not an option for us yet because, as I told you, Pennsylvania, like New York, we're not an arrestee state. So that first one is not an option. crime scene or a crime scene database to suspect, that's the most simple deployment of rapid DNA. When you have crime scenes and then you have people in a database, or you have a suspect where you can get their DNA, you can get a match in 90 minutes. So that's a pretty good analysis. Casework against a state offender base, not an option for us yet. That might be coming, but we're going to talk to you about we're going to talk to you a little bit in about 9 minutes about a little workaround we did with the city of Philadelphia, which is certainly something that you all could consider, the ones that are close to New York City, because a lot of folks that are committing crimes in New York City, I'm sure, make their way into your jurisdictions as well. And then the other one is local reference database. That is what we chose to implement using one-to-one, one person to our database or to a crime scene. So we'll get into a little bit more detail in a few minutes on that. Again, I am law enforcement. I am not lab. I think I had Bio 101 in high school, and that was the end of biology or any science. It was not my cup of tea. So I didn't know anything really about DNA. And in 2010, we were asked to take a meeting just to hear about DNA, and we were sold. And that was in 2010, and we created a local database. And in March of 2017, this technology came available for civilian law enforcement, and we purchased through a grant the first rapid machine that got deployed within a municipal police department and was utilized 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We were the first ones in the United States to do this. And in 2017 later, Montgomery County, a county near us, and also we started using this in the rest of our county. And in 2021, right in the beginning of COVID, we had kind of joined forces with the city of Philadelphia to do a regional database, and I'll get back to that in a few minutes. Our focus of the program, and I think you heard Lisa and Lauren talk about this a little bit. This was an investigative tool. This was not, Lisa talked about, this has not been challenged really in court yet, because this is not the end all got all for us. This is just a piece of evidence that we use with putting a case together. It's not we got a hit and we run out and slap handcuffs on somebody. That's not what we do. But what we find is once we tell a suspect that we have their DNA and it was a match, the game's kind of over. You know, they know that DNA is pretty conclusive evidence, and we wind up getting confessions from them. And that's what we bring to court. And most of this stuff is all guilty pleas. We've had very, very few, and I'm talking about very few, since 2010, less than 5 go to actual trial. I don't even think it's 5, but I'm just gonna go a little high just in case there's 1 or 2 I can't remember from 14 years of doing this now, and 7 or 8 years doing rapid. So that's a pretty good result. Officers and investigators play the biggest pole in this and getting the collection. This can't be something that you see a webinar, and I don't know the rank of people that are on here. I know we have about 300 folks on here. I don't know what the ranks are. It doesn't tell me. But if the chief or the head law enforcement or district attorney is not on board and making this a priority, it won't work. This is a new way of policing for us. It's not just not a fad. It's not the chief's new idea, something that's going to go and he or she is just going to forget about it in a couple months. If you want this to work, it's got to be a new philosophy of policing, and that's what's become here in Bucks County. Detectives and our supervisors are all trained in the utilization of the rapid instrument. And we get DNA at about 95% of our reported crimes. People leave DNA behind a lot easier than they leave fingerprints. I'm not saying don't do fingerprints. That's still a major player in investigative tools. But people leave more DNA behind than they do their fingerprints. Our collection protocols through judicial orders, or most of it is consent. People give us consent for their DNA. You're like, well, how is that possible? Well, why do people give us consent to search their trunk when they got 7 kilos of cocaine sitting there in plain view? I don't know, but until 9 people in Washington tell us to stop, we're going to keep doing what we're doing. I think they give us their consent because they watch the same TV shows we watch. They know that, well, I'm not a murderer and I'm not a rapist. I'm just a burglar, or I just steal from stores, or I'm just dealing drugs. So they don't think we're out testing DNA on these other crimes, and we are. We test DNA on all crimes. So I think that's why people give us their consent. You got to get your prosecutor's office on board. I know all the other presenters that say that. You got to get your lab on board. This cannot be done in a bubble. You want your lab on board with this. You want them involved with it. You want them to be a part of it. This is a team effort. Evidence collection, you got to triage your evidence, training, and more training, like anything else in law enforcement. It's not one and done. We do refreshers all the time. I told you this, like Pennsylvania, New York is not able to search our state database or CODIS. That's why we're doing the local databasing. Therefore, I'm going to focus on showing you some of the results that we use rapid DNA against our database or just crime scene one-to-one. So that's what we're going to focus on. I have hundreds of examples. I got 10 to 15 minutes. So we've really cut it down to a handful just to kind of whet your appetite. And of course, my contact information will be on the last slide. Please feel free to reach out to me. I always get a couple of calls after these webinars. I think it's very important. So one of the ones I wanted to talk about real quickly was just a criminal case. Simple, not a lot of rocket scientists to this. Robbery and multiple vehicle investigations. Kind of a nice little crime spree here in 6 months. We suffered an influx like everybody else gets vehicle thefts. And then in one particular case, an elderly victim was robbed of her car at knife point. A suspect was developed in this case, and we obtained a search warrant. Sometimes you got to go the old-fashioned way. We obtained a search warrant for his DNA. The DNA was entered into the rapid machine. Within 90 minutes, it hit to multiple crimes. We were able to close out 6 stolen vehicles and an armed robbery from his DNA. And we see this over and over and over again, where we're getting retail thefts, low-level crimes, we're getting them leaving plastic bags behind when they run from the stores, and then we run the DNA on that, and then it hits to people, an individual in the database, and then we get a confirmation swab from him, and now it's hitting to multiple crimes. We see it with drugs, we see it with burglaries, we see it with assaults, we see it with sexual assaults. So we see a lot of crimes, but I think this one really just exemplifies the crime aspect of it. But it's not just about crime. It's also about making sure, a lot of people don't think that we care about this, that we think about this, that we actually do this, but we do it. And DNA makes it so much easier for us, especially the rapid instrument. Exoneration and exclusion. We want to make sure that innocent people are not in jail, because we want to make sure that the right perpetrator goes to jail. Because if the innocent person is in jail, one, that's a crime by itself. It's wrong on so many aspects and so many levels. And two is there's a criminal running loose out there that we're not looking for anymore. So one particular case, we had an elderly woman that was sexually assaulted. So she claimed. She seemed extremely credible. She identifies an individual. She says, this guy is the one that assaulted me. He is a Megan's Law offender. He was a known sexual assault person. His girlfriend lived in the same complex. He was seen on video outside, not like at her apartment, but in the area, and he had no alibi. And she positively identified him. Take DNA out of the equation. That alone would have probably got him a conviction, and he probably would still be in jail. Well, we arrest him based on all that information. He proclaims his innocence. We didn't run his DNA at this time because there was some laws changed in Pennsylvania, but it really doesn't matter now what I'm going to tell you. He proclaimed his innocence. Something did not seem right with the detectives. So she said that the guy drank coffee right before he committed the sexual assault. So we tested the coffee cup, and we tested the semen from the rape victim, and we tested the subject, and guess what? It wasn't him. He was telling the truth. She then went on to identify 2 other individuals. We quickly exclude them as the possible actors. We then find out later from her family that she's suffering from some mental illness, that it would have been nice for them to tell us that from the beginning, but they did not. So here's a case. We got this guy. He spent a weekend in jail, and we got him out of jail. So we use it now quite often for exclusion and exoneration. Human identification. Back in July, remember, now we just got this March of 17. July of 17, we have a quadruple homicide. 4 boys go missing within a 4-day period of time. And a suspect is developed, guy that lived in our municipality, Cosmo DiNardo. I don't know if this made national news. Cosmo winds up trying to set up drug deals with these 4 kids. Marijuana, I mean, no one deserves to die from buying drugs. Cosmo sets these guys up. He winds up kidnapping them and killing these 4 young men on his family farm. So some information is developed. We wind up at the farm. The farm is I showed you Bucks County. Cosmo lives in the lower end in Bensalem. The farm is about the middle part of the county, about 45 minutes away from where Cosmo lived and where these abductions took place. But to make a long story short, we get to the farm. We find blood stains on the back of a backhoe in the farm, blood stains on the floor in the farm, and it matches 2 of the suspects. We're able to match it to the suspects because we got their toothbrushes from their houses. Human remains are then found on July 13th in almost a 13-foot grave, and we're matching through the toothbrushes. The boys were burned, beaten. The faces were unrecognizable. We're actually able to match 3 of the boys, and the 4th boy cannot be found. The death penalty was taken off the table if you identify the 4th boy. Where the body is, it was about a half-mile away. So we were able to get the 4th boy identified and bring peace and at least closure for the family members. And I think that's very important too. So we used rapid. It would have taken us a while to get the DNA process, but now we're getting this done, and we're able to give families closure in minutes versus days, weeks, or longer. Then in 2021, we were able to talk with Philadelphia, the director of the lab there, who is really very progressive, and I mean a good progressive, not what Washington has done to the word progressive. So we're able to access now the Philadelphia Lotus, their local database, and we're getting a lot of hits. It's actually doing better for Philadelphia than it is for us. So a lot of the people that we're arresting and processing through Rapid is now hitting the Philadelphia crimes. We're not talking about retail theft anymore. If you're watching the news, Philadelphia is pretty busy with homicides. We're getting homicide hits, sexual assault hits, and some major crime hits out of the city of Philadelphia, and then giving those names to Philadelphia. So this is something that certainly can be done with New York City, I believe, as time goes on, because criminals don't stop at the borders like we do. They cross paths very often. So I think that's very important. Some statistics. We've got probably close to 60,000 now in our database. Almost half reference, half evidence. We're getting a lot of hits, a lot of cross-agency hits. Like I said, we have 39 police departments in our county. We're getting, well over 1,000 now rapid hits. The regional database has over 300 hits to 33 cases, and we've eliminated 26 people. We've excluded 26 people that would have been really good suspects for crimes, are now not because of this. And again, we were looking for property crime. We're getting a lot of narcotics, and we're hitting on violent crimes as well. We're getting a lot of gun crimes. We're getting about 95% DNA off of our guns, more than we're getting fingerprints. So with Philadelphia being so close to us, bordering us, we're getting a lot of guns from the city up here and closing a lot of jobs. What we've seen a 42% reduction in burglary, and the county has seen a 25% reduction. At the same time, the national average was about 4.5% reduction. Plus, we're seeing closures, 51% enforceable rape. We're in about 52% of armed robberies. Car thefts are about 26% reduction. So we're seeing some incredible results here. Again, I had 15 minutes to do what normally I do in 2 hours. So that's my contact. The upper right is my DNA profile. It means nothing. This is one of the things that New York will probably be faced with as well, like we were faced with. And one of the things I do is I do presentations to any group that wants to hear it. NAACP, ACLU, whoever wants to hear what we're doing, I'll be more than happy to tell them, because our DNA that we take, we refer to it in law enforcement as junk DNA. I know the scientists don't like that term. It only tells you male or female. We're not Jerry Springer. It doesn't tell us if you are the father. It doesn't tell us if you're for Middle East descent. It doesn't tell us if you're white or black. It doesn't tell you whether you're gay or straight, or whether you have predisposed for cancer, or if you're right-handed or blue-eyed or green-eyed. It tells us if you're male or female. That's all it tells us. So it's harmless. That's why I put it on the PowerPoint and share my DNA profile. All right, I'll be here at the end if there's questions. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Sheriff Heron. We are now pleased to welcome Sheriff James Allard. Prior to joining the Steuben County Sheriff's Office, Sheriff Allard retired as lieutenant from the City of Corning Police Department after serving for 21 years. And as the current sheriff of Steuben County, New York, Sheriff Allard will discuss how he plans to use potential grant money to launch a new rapid DNA program in Steuben County. Over to you, Sheriff.
Thank you, Lauren. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. It's a beautiful day in Steuben County. I listened to Sheriff Heron describe his county, and we're kind of the diametric opposite. We're a very large geographic county. We're 1,400 square miles, and we often say we're larger than the state of Rhode Island, but with only 92,000 people, as opposed to Sheriff Heron's 522,000 people. The thing that makes us different also is where we're centered in almost the center of upstate New York, in the middle of the Finger Lakes region. We have 3 interstates that run through our county, I-86, I-99, and I-390, which carry people from New York City to Rochester and Buffalo, carry people from Philadelphia to Rochester and Buffalo. And so there's a major amount of trafficking through our county. We also have a large amount of leased hunting land and residential or seasonal residences on our lakes that people are often prey to property crimes. A lot of our jobs are cabin burglaries, cottage burglaries, and other things when they're vacant. So when we first began collecting DNA routinely with our evidence technicians a few years ago, it started making a big difference in our property crime solution. Then we're looking forward at rapid DNA to be able to really amp this up and start closing those gaps. So we're excited to be able to apply for the grant in order to put rapid DNA in place, but also to use it in our region. We have 6 contiguous counties, and we have great relationships with our policing in those counties, but also here within Steuben County with our 10 separate agencies that we have. So we're looking forward to being a DNA hub, for lack of a better description. And we're looking very much forward to being able to help everybody in the region with property crimes through rapid DNA. And the stats that Sheriff Heron put up were incredibly impressive with the reduction in property crime and the hits. As I said, we were excited when we solved 16 burglaries a year ago due to DNA collection. I can only imagine what we're going to see in the future. So because of the success of rapid DNA with property crimes and other types, we've decided to pursue a rapid DNA program. And the first step in that was to apply for funding. And we did that through the Congressional Earmark Program. And we've been informed that we've made it through the first step of approval, and that it's highly likely that we will be approved for the final step. So when that happens, we're going to be ready to launch into a regional program. Now, we still use the state police and love the work they do. They're phenomenal professionals with their laboratories, and we will adopt the 2 swab protocol, where 1 swab goes to the state police, 1 goes into rapid DNA and moving forward. But the state police they're overwhelmed because they're not just supporting their own agency, but the majority of agencies in New York State. So to be able to get things in 90 minutes is going to be a game changer in our ability to investigate timely and move forward. So we look very much forward to being able to do that. Again, the 2 swab protocol is going to be incredibly important to verify with evidence that we can introduce into cases in court with testimony from the state police crime lab, utilizing rapid DNA as our investigative tool. And once CODIS is opened up for us, which we hope does occur within the next 2 years, that's just going to expand our ability to use the data we have, the data they have, and combine them into something that's going to help every agency in this region. You heard Sheriff Heron talk about exonerating the innocent. How huge is that? How huge is that to be able to say, no, we definitively know that you were not the perpetrator? Again, Sheriff Heron's got 4 years on me and in law enforcement, but think of the changes we've seen over the last 30 years in our ability to investigate and the tools that we have to use to investigate crimes. It's so different from what it was even 20 years ago, but this is going to take us into the next generation of investigating and giving us the ability to secure those matches that are going to be unassailable. So as the speaker from Florida International University mentioned, when we don't get a green light showing a full DNA profile, a DNA analyst will be required to confirm the presence of a usable DNA profile. If the state crime lab doesn't have the resources to help us with that, we plan to use a reachback service through a private DNA laboratory that will perform that. And we already do that on some cases of extreme violent crime. We want to make sure that we have that analysis immediately so we can quickly move on to any matches. While property crimes are our focus, again, as Sheriff Heron laid out so eloquently, violent crime is going to become part of this too. So often when we, due to the volume of things that are submitted to the state police lab, we often have to pick and choose the most important. With rapid DNA, we'll be able to test everything. And again, if something turns up that we want to have as testimony in a court system, we'll submit that secondary swab to the state police lab for that. Timeline and funding, we're told that this is going to take about 18 months to really get it up and rolling. And we look forward to that, but that gives us time to pick the brain of Sheriff Heron and others and make sure that we have the policy in place, that we have the training in place and the ability to hit the ground running when funding does arrive. As I said, we went through the Congressional Community Improvement Project Program, which are typically known as congressional earmarks. And we've made it through the first, I believe, 2 stages of approval. And we look forward to having final approval and being able to move forward with this incredibly functional tool. As you heard earlier, over 35 local law enforcement agencies have been awarded funding from Congress through this approach. And again, we encourage anybody who wants to move forward in this program to secure that through your local Congress person or your local senator. It's all federal money, and it would appear that Congress is interested in funding these rapid DNA regional labs because it helps everybody. It helps public safety, and it's a great thing for all of us to have to use. So we're excited about this. We're excited about the future of rapid DNA, not only in our county, but in our region. As I said, with 6 contiguous counties, and we border PA also, we're looking forward to creating a regional repository of data and being able to help all of our neighbors as we do in many other ways, and look forward to a regional situation where we can help solve crime and raise the stakes and the efficiency in our crime solving and investigations. So I'll be around also later, but I think most of our questions will go to Sheriff Heron. But thanks for listening to me, and I'll give it back to Lauren.
Thank you, Sheriff. Our next presenter today is Doug Ayers, who currently serves as the FBI Rapid DNA Implementation Advisor. And before leading the Rapid DNA effort for the FBI laboratory, Doug served as the FBI's custodian for a national DNA index system and served as a liaison to all CODIS programs throughout the country. And Doug will give us an update on the FBI's path for forensic DNA use in CODIS. Over to you, Doug. Thank you, Doug. Our final presenter today is Megan Fitzpatrick, Megan works for the New York State Patrol Crime Laboratory and provides oversight of training programs. And since 2022, has been working on rapid DNA instrument assessments, instrument validations, and potential integration into the section's workflow. Megan, over to you.
Good morning, Lauren. Can you hear me?
Yep, good to go.
Okay, thank you for the introduction. As Lauren indicated, I work at the New York State Police Laboratory. To give you a little understanding of our laboratory system, in New York State, there is our headquarters laboratory. That is the only DNA laboratory in Albany, New York. And then there's 3 regional laboratories in the Western region, Southern Tier, and Mid-Hudson, or Olean, Port Crane, and Newburgh. Those 3 satellite laboratories do not have DNA capability. So to give you an idea of where we're coming from at the New York State Police, we are currently validating and planning for rapid instrumentation and implementation across the state. One of our goals is to be a resource not only to the troopers, but to forensic laboratories in New York State, as well as law enforcement agencies that are interested in this technology. So we've talked a lot about different ways rapid can help. One of the big components is mass disaster identification. It's been a game changer for the Miami building collapse, California and Hawaii fires. There was a boat fire off the coast of California. We want to be prepared for these types of situations in New York State. In addition, there's human trafficking and border security. One of the components of both instruments is they have a kinship software that we will plan on validating and looking into. There's military and civilian identification, lawfully owed convicted offender samples. It's not something we're currently looking into. Doug and Lisa mentioned arrestee collection, which New York State does not do, but Doug and Lisa also mentioned DISC, which is a great way for us to start being able to benefit from the RAPID program. So when I talk about forensic approval, I want to emphasize that it's all tentative. I'm going to kind of try to go through it as quick as I can because of time, but I want to emphasize our goal in New York State is to hit the national NDIS approval. We want to take advantage of the biggest pool possible for profile searches. So currently in New York, we have over 700,000 convicted offender samples and over 8,500 or 1,000 forensic samples. That's a pretty big pool. It's much bigger than just a local database. So we want to be as successful as possible. And then by going national, we can hit over 15 million convicted offender samples and 1 million forensic profiles. So the bigger the profile pool to search, the more successful and the better probability that you'll get a hit. And then every time I think about rapid technology in terms of forensic use, I keep thinking back to the Clinton Correctional Prison escape. Our laboratory became a 24-hour facility, and we did tremendous work. Our whole unit was fabulous, but the ability to set up a mobile unit up north and instead of having to run samples down to Albany would have been a game changer in terms of that travel time. We would have had a DNA profile. So I see so many opportunities for this program. We've talked a lot about how you get a profile in 90 minutes. We're using the same technology, just modifying it a little bit. And we really stress that samples have to be single source. So there must be an understanding of what is the appropriate sample selection. And the A and B swab has been talked about a lot. We want to emphasize that if you have very little sample, rapid is not the way to go. We want the lab sample to be the one that goes through if you do not have a lot to go on. These are for investigative leads. And we're also, like I mentioned earlier, we want to look into the kinship software for mass disaster identification. That needs to be validated. I'm going to talk about validation, and I know Doug talked a lot about the quality assurance standards as well. So to give you an idea of where we're at, where we're heading, in 2022, we purchased both instruments. So we have one Andy and one rapid hit in-house. At that time, we performed assessments for both reference and evidence samples on these instruments. We coordinated that with the DNA data bank and our forensic identification unit, or FIU. And we kind of tested a wide variety of reference samples and evidence samples. We wanted to see what the instruments were really capable of in our hands, and we wanted to get feedback from our FIU staff and what they thought was feasible. So we're currently validating the Andy. That's the top instrument. We're almost finished with our reference validation, and we're going to start writing that up soon. And then the bottom instrument, the rapid hit ID, is we were getting ready to validate. We had a proposal in the works, and then the software upgrade became available. That upgrade is going to be essential for FBI approval in 2025. So we kind of put a hold on that. We're wrapping up that proposal, and then we're going to start that. So there's advantages and disadvantages to this to both instruments, but I wanted to talk about the pros. Andy is great in the sense that you can run multiple samples at one time, and the instrument setup is minimal. There's no refrigeration required for those chips, so offsite is really easy to set up. Rapid hit is also ideal if you just need to run one sample at a time, and bone and teeth processing on this platform is minimal. So depending on what your agency needs are, either one may be ideal for you. I'm really thrilled that the New York State Police purchased both because we can kind of cover both kind of scenarios. Andy allows, I'm sure Robert covered this, I apologize, I had some network issues. You to either be able to run 4 evidence samples or 5 references at a time. So batching is key. If you're doing some high throughput need, such as in a mass disaster, that might be the way to go. If you're in a rush and you need an investigative lead with one sample, rapid hit might be ideal. So again, I really want to emphasize that our goal is to be a resource to the state for law enforcement and to forensic labs. So to give you an idea, we're wrapping up our Andy reference validation. We've covered buccal swabs, proficiency test samples, we've covered bloodstain cards, kind of the gamut of what could be submitted in that validation. And then we're trying to get to our rapid hit reference validation in either late August or early September. Once a validation is complete in New York State, we are required to present to the New York State DNA Subcommittee and the Commission of Forensic Science. We have to talk about the intended use of the instrument and our validation results. And in addition, Doug talked about how accreditation is a really big requirement for laboratories. We have to expand the scope of our accreditation to notify the accrediting body that we're going to be using rapid. So from a law enforcement perspective that isn't on a daily interaction with the laboratory, those might be slightly different things you might have to consider. I believe Robert probably showed you this, but I just wanted to emphasize again, the Intel Plus cartridges, those are the ones that are being designed for forensic approval, are on the left. You put the sample in and the reference cartridges look the exact same. And then on the right are the 2 Andy chips. The A chip is for buccal swabs, so you can run 5 samples at a time. And then the B is for either bloodstain cards for references or evidence samples. So both instruments give a DNA profile in approximately 90 minutes. Current eligibility at ENDIS. Doug talked about this a lot. So our approach, and there's 3, he mentioned the laboratory, forensic, and booking stations. We are looking at the rapid DNA for modified. So anyone can run this. And that's been one of the things that have been stressed today is these were designed to be run by law enforcement personnel. It is our goal to have and train law enforcement to run these samples. And then it becomes kind of the ownership of the laboratory to do the DNA interpretation and review. That is how we're approaching it. And obviously we want to be ready for the FBI approval for evidence samples. That is our goal. We're building towards that. During our assessment, we tested pretty much all of these sample types. And this is where it goes back to knowing what is the appropriate sample to pick. So cigarette butts, discarded beer bottles, water bottles, tools and property crimes. Sometimes all of those can be mixtures. So sample selection is really key. And baseball hats. Anyone in law enforcement knows that baseball hats left at crime scenes often lead to mixtures. We did test this during our assessment. We used baseball hats that we know are worn by only one individual, and we got great results on those. So it's possible, but again, you have to be careful. So anything reference related, human remains, bone, teeth, and tissue samples are great on rapid. Swabs with either saliva or blood, and clothing samples with bloodstain cards or potential saliva. Coordination and planning. I think the big message here today is there needs to be a program in place. There needs to be coordination and planning with the laboratory and the law enforcement agency. This isn't a quick, we bought the instrument, we're going to set it up and move forward. There's a lot of steps that need to be in this process. So what we're doing is we're building towards 2025 implementation of evidence, but we want to start getting our reference program in place first. The big key here is Doug also mentioned the network component. Networking and security is really, really important. So our goal is to build slow. We obviously have it internally in our laboratory, but we want to build and have offsite locations and know what we need to deal with network components and build all of that up so we can get bigger and bigger as we go. And Doug also mentioned the quality assurance standards, and why do those matter? From a law enforcement perspective, they might not know about these. These are essentially the playbook that all DNA laboratories have to have in place in order to move DNA profiles up the chain from local to state to national. It's a requirement. These aren't guidelines. We have to follow these. This is an essential core of our quality program. So to kind of have an understanding, these standards have been around for quite some time. There's standards for forensic laboratories and standards for databasing laboratories. So they've been around since 1998 and 1999. So this is just a continuation of that established quality program. And thank you, Doug, for letting me use this slide. I greatly appreciate it. I just really want to emphasize the goal here is we want to expand and have partnerships either within our own state police system or with other law enforcement agencies, but we have to assess the risk and ensure that we meet all of the standards because it falls under our accreditation. So the lab kind of holds that responsibility for that. And we want to make sure it benefits both partners in this program. Doug also mentioned that the QAS, on January 5th, the comment period closed. So our laboratory, we made some public comments. We reviewed the documentation. The big change going forward, if it's anticipated to be implemented in 2025, is they really broke out RAPID into two new standards, one for the laboratory and one for partner agencies. So the big thing I want to take away from this is training will be our responsibility. We want to train law enforcement agencies, New York State FIU units, to understand how to run these instruments, the quality component that's involved in them, and then understand that our role is to do the DNA interpretation. So it's going to be a program that builds on partnerships and trust between the two, and making sure that every step along the way we have that coordination and planning. So lab requirements, this is where our job kind of gets a little bit bigger. We need to notify the accreditation body that we're expanding. We're using RAPID. We need to also present, like I mentioned before, in front of the New York State Commission on Forensic Science and the DNA subcommittee regarding RAPID. We're going to be responsible for the training program and oversight. That's actually one of the things I'm most excited about, is getting out and training different agencies on this. We're going to be talking, our lab will be responsible for data and ensuring the secure network. So the big takeaway I want everyone to come away with today is this program has so many possibilities, and we're very, very excited about it, but we want to make sure that there's an understanding on what needs to occur. And I also really want to emphasize New York State requires, based on Executive Law 995, any agency or laboratory that's going to be using RAPID must speak in front of the commission in order to move forward with that. So that's something we think we're probably going to have to do at least 4 times, depending on the timing of when our validations are done, and talk about what we're validating, what we intend to use, what our results were, and how we're going to set up our program. So that's something we're gearing towards for either late in the fall or early in the winter of 2025. And Doug and Lisa also mentioned the CODIS DISC component, and I know Fred talked a lot about their search success stories as well. We are currently looking at profiles that can be moved up at DISC, so we can already take advantage of this. I have an email at the end for our CODIS unit. We're encouraging everyone to reach out to our CODIS unit with questions, but the big key here is if a sample, single source sample from crime scenes that from unsolved homicides, sex assault, kidnappings, or terrorism occurs and gets uploaded, and someone in either Louisiana or Florida gets arrested that matches that, we can get a hit, and it can go much quicker than a traditional investigative lead hit. So we're taking advantage of that, and we're building towards that eventual, our forensic programs or profiles can go into that. I also wanted to take a moment to recognize the other laboratories in New York State that are DNA laboratories. We have Erie, Monroe, Onondaga, Westchester, Nassau, Suffolk counties, as well as OCME in New York City. Our forensic laboratory is our local laboratory in Albany as well. So there's a lot of labs across the state that are available for talking to or having us be part of. And we just wanted to mention our colleagues in those laboratories as well. There's a lot of papers out there on RAPID. I've read a ton of them. This particular paper I really like because on the last few pages, there's a table of compare and contrast the 2 different instruments, the cost, the advantage of each platform. So just from a law enforcement agency component, that paper, that chart is really instrumental in having you think about what you want to pursue. The resources that are available in the Rapid community, Doug mentioned All Things Rapid. That paper is fantastic. I also want to give Robert a shout out. His group has been doing some excellent work and they've been very, very helpful to us. Andy and Thermo Fisher have websites that have a ton of information on Rapid. There's two groups that I'm part of that we talk about Rapid. We have virtual meetings, we do planning, we do training to train different laboratories about what's available. They've been essential in our understanding and thought of how to build this. So please reach out. There's a lot of labs across the country who are already doing this that have been so helpful to us and really have set up some really incredibly impressive programs. So what we're looking for today is to please reach out to us. We want to talk about this. We want to start planning. We want to build the excitement because I think this is really an exciting program and there's so many possibilities with this. We're waiting on the QAS changes, the quality assurance standard. We're looking forward to the guidance that will be established by the FBI for that. And we also want to pursue having a mobile unit. So if we do have a disaster scenario, we can go to that, kind of like we would have set up if Dannemora happened today, hypothetically, we would want to be able to go and do that on scene. We have a great team at the New York State Police. Mary Malpe, Joe Lang, Jonathan Hogue, and Chris White, unfortunately, was not available for the picture. I also wanted to thank Tim and Lauren for setting this up and having me present. It's a great honor. Doug Hares, Lisa Hurst, Robert O'Brien, Sheriff Fred Herron, and Sheriff Allard for speaking. And Lieutenant Eric Smith and our senior investigator, Brian Kenny, they were part of our assessment. They're a lot of fun to work with, and I really enjoy that interaction. I also wanted to acknowledge our section director, Julie Pizzichetti, and our assistant director, Nicole Herbanek, and our soon-to-be retired lab director, Ray Wickenheiser, who is still in our laboratory as of today. He's been a big help for this program and very supportive. So thank you to everyone. And I wanted to shout out to Nicole again today because we had major network issues. So she was very helpful during this whole presentation to me, along with our one of our IT colleagues, Larry. Here are our contact information. Julie Pizzichetti is on here as well, the section director. And CODIS, please reach out to the CODIS unit if you have any questions regarding DISC. And please feel free to contact me at any time. And I'm sorry I went very, very fast, but I know we're right at the end and I want to make sure Lauren can get some Q&A in. So thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Megan, and thank you, Doug, for laying out the future of rapid DNA evidence searches of CODIS. It's very exciting. So yeah, we have a couple minutes for questions. All right, the first question we have here is for Sheriff Herron. And this question says, Bucks County uses the A and B swab protocol in its local rapid DNA program. Could you share your experience with the A and B swab standard? And how often does the A swab test completed at the lab have a different result than the B swab tested on rapid?
The answer to that question is never. We've never had a different result from the laboratory. And again, this was my presentation is normally about an hour and a half to 2 hours if I'm at a conference and we cover all that. So I apologize, but we have never had a different result from the laboratory. So it's right on the money. And we do the A and B swab as everybody has talked about.
Thanks, Fred.
Okay.
Oh, did you have more?
No, I just wanted to make sure that answered the question. I think I did.
Yep. Okay, we'll ask one more. This one's for Doug. What advice can the FBI offer to local law enforcement and the New York State Police Crime Lab to help them prepare for the change of permitting DNA evidence to be tested on rapid DNA to be searched in CODIS?
Yeah, I think this was a theme today, and it's about partnerships. One of the things that I'm able to do is we have meetings with all the CODIS administrators for every CODIS laboratory in the states every year, and this is something I've been talking with them for a long time. So this is not new to them. Many of these labs are just waiting for the structure to be in place, and so they're waiting for that 2025 so they can start building these programs. And so really, it's about partnership. It's about compromise on both ends. In the beginning, it's going to be a little slow, but these programs will build and they will be very successful. We've seen it, and we're excited about it. So I think that's the best advice I can offer.
Thanks, Doug. That wraps up our webinar for today. Thank you to all of our presenters and everyone who joined us. We really hope this information is helpful as you consider the issues related to advancing rapid DNA in your jurisdiction. Please feel free to reach out to GTH DNA or any of the speakers if you have any questions. And we also encourage you to visit www.gorapiddna.com, where you can find additional rapid DNA policy and program information and updates. We are planning to post today's webinar and most of the presentations on the Go Rapid DNA website by the end of the day, if you would like to review it or share it with others in your office. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.